Welcome, Ingrid. I'd like to talk to you about your role as a school completion coordinator with TUSLA Education Support Services. But before we maybe go into the real detail, maybe if you just give us a broad outline as to what your service actually does.
Okay, so I suppose my project is one of 122 projects in the country. We are funded by TUSLA, and we in Knocknaheeny have four schools in our cluster, 2 schools amalgamated earlier in the year. Every project is very different, and we have a suite of interventions aimed at keeping children in school for as long as possible. So we're working with children right from 4 years of age up to 18.
And in your own experience and in that role, maybe you could describe for us the importance and the impact of early intervention to mitigate against education disadvantage and to create access issues.
Yeah, I suppose the phrase early intervention kind of means 2 things to me. I interpret it kind of 2 different ways. One being, get in there as early as possible, as in, working with a child at the age of 4 in preschool or, in junior infants. And then the other way I kind of look at it is, whatever age the child is at, getting in when the need arises. So when the need does arise, being ready to, put the services in immediately, which doesn't always happen as quickly as we'd like. But so I kind of look at it in 2 different ways, really, I suppose.
And in that role, are you working with the wider family?
That is a message that I really, really want to kind of get across. I think you cannot work with the child, as an individual. You have to work with the family. What we do is all about working with the family. And I wouldn't even stop there. I think it's about the community as well. The whole community really has a role to play here. And definitely when we tend to work with a particular child, we tend to work with their siblings and their parents as well, as far as we can possibly do.
So would I be correct in saying, from your perspective, access isn't just contained within the child, it's a wider, complex issue that has other factors that have to be taken into consideration?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why the community is very important, because we can't maybe meet all of the needs, but we need to bring in other services or signposts or work collaboratively with other services to meet the need of the child that we see in front of us on a daily basis.
And maybe in that regard, if you could maybe identify for us some of the challenges that you have encountered and some of the responses and innovations that you have come up to work your way through those challenges and to ensure that those children are getting the access that they require.
Yeah, well, I suppose there's kind of 2 things there in terms of maybe equity and equality.
Okay.
I think it's very important to kind of distinguish between the 2. And in terms of, funding and services, we need to be looking at equity, and we need to be putting the services in where they're needed. And for us, with young people coming into school, we find that, a lot of children, 4 years of age, 5 years of age, maybe they're starting school too early. They don't have maybe a long experience of preschool. There are maybe speech and language issues, literacy issues, and all of those kind of challenges where you find that a child arrives into school and they're not quite ready to be in school. And then we look at, well, what do we need to do to get this child, to a place where they can positively engage rather than starting off negatively on the back foot.
And you mentioned working with other agencies and organisations in terms of our discussion here, insofar as the Cork Access Network and creating access routes. Who are the agencies that you are working with, and what is the type of collaborations that you need to make that coming together actually work for the child?
Oh, it's huge, really. And, I suppose we started off, years ago working interagency collaboration in the community, but we've spread out since into the city, maybe on a more national level. Cork City Council are vital to the work that we do. The Let's Grow Together ABC programme, the local family centre, the local preschools, traveller support agencies. There's a huge amount of agencies. I suppose I'm lucky in the community that I work in. We have access to all of those agencies, very easily.
And would I be correct in saying that it's not just the interagency, but it's the interpersonal relationship between the people working in the agency? Is that important?
Yes, it's vital. It's absolutely vital. And I think there again lies another challenge, in that a lot of these agencies are funded with ridiculously small budgets or maybe very unstable budgets. And I think, you know, all of the work that we do is very relational based, be it with us and the child, be it with us and the other agencies. And, you know, agencies with high staff turnover, poor funding, not knowing where they're going to be next year, you know, can really be a challenge to that kind of work.
We're now in 2022, but I'd like to go back just a little bit and speak to you. You were very, very heavily involved in the community response to COVID-19, of which I think the community groups and the responses came together in kind of early to mid 2019.
Yeah.
Could you maybe tell us how what was the impact upon families that you were witnessing upon at that time, and what were the responses, or what you saw as the priority responses that needed to be dealt with?
Well, I suppose like everybody else, you know, March 2020, we were sent home on the 12th of March and, you know, kind of spent a couple of days wondering what's going on. But I have to say we hit the ground running really by early the following week. And there's 6 of us on my team. And we immediately made contact with the families that we're working with. But not only that, going back to kind of what I said earlier about working with other agencies, the schools that I work in, we immediately linked up with them, and the Cork City Council were absolutely vital, I suppose, in the role that they played. And we kind of, I suppose, we looked at what was necessary, what was the need, and from talking to our parents and our families and our young people, and we put together a kind of a programme of response, I suppose, in terms of packages around food, fuel, school resources, books, and right throughout the lockdowns, I've lost count of how many lockdowns we've had at this stage, but right throughout we maintained that contact through telephone calls, but home visits as well, which were, you know, doorstep visits, but very important to kind of keep that relationship open. And, you know, it was important for us to meet our young people, but also the parents, you know, I think welcomed it. And, you know, a lot of the challenges that we saw were in terms of poverty, homelessness, substandard housing, and the digital divide was absolutely huge, really, for a lot of the children that
maybe if I could
we're working
ask
with.
you to expand upon the digital divide, give me some examples of how you were encountering that, spotting it, and how responses were maybe looked at in terms of dealing with that divide.
I suppose through our conversations with the parents, really, it became apparent that a lot of houses did not have a device of any sort other than a phone, maybe. And they might have had one phone, but they might have had, you know, 3 children needing to access. Now, a lot of teenagers use their phones for online learning during the lockdown. And, you know, some people had problems that I kind of thought, well, if they're comfortable with their phone, leave them with their phone. But it's when you're sharing that one device is a problem. Broadband was a huge issue. A lot of families just didn't have it. So immediately we had to look at how we were going to resource that. And again, coming together, Cork City Council were very good. Schools had access to funds. We've since been able to access various funds, and the local libraries as well have been very good from that regard. And I suppose we did our best to mitigate that by actually loaning out as much as we could, and, you know, organising broadband for people so that they could get on
technology.
Loaning out technology. A lot of technology was loaned out, and since returned and cleaned and loaned out again, you know, so it's ongoing.
And did you find that, as you were explaining there, the kids can be quite good on their phones and on technology, but were those skill sets present in the parents and in the wider family?
No. And like I'm a dinosaur myself when it comes to IT, so, you know, I include myself in it, but it was very difficult, and it is an ongoing issue, and it is one of the issues that we're looking at now, I suppose, going forward in terms of upskilling the parents and building the capacity, especially online safety and internet safety and areas like that. But, you know, a lot of teachers really, I suppose, had to very quickly hit the ground, you know, running in terms of the apps and the software, which they did. But we now need to maybe, you know, upskill the parents in that area as well.
Okay. We're at the start of a new year now. We've come through a traumatic, but also a very changing world, and in some ways it's changed that we will never go back to, as you particularly in the digital technologies area.
Yeah.
In terms of school completion and ensuring that kids get through school so that they can commence that lifelong journey in the proper manner, how do you, or what would you identify as maybe your top 1 or 2 priorities that need to happen to make school completion more successful for kids that you work with?
I think going back to what I said earlier about the kind of relationship model, and I think, you know, all the research is telling us that one good adult is very, very important to young people. And I think funding securely the resources that already exist in a lot of cases. I don't think we should be looking to reinvent the wheel or anything. A lot of these facilities already exist, but they're just so unstable. So I think, you know, creating a kind of a culture where you maintain that staff presence and that relationship. And a lot of young people would say to me that, you know, they feel very comfortable with staff that they knew from primary school into secondary school. And I think we're making progress in terms of post-primary completion. Not enough, but we're going in the right direction. But there's a huge gap then in terms of the hurdle from post-primary into third level. And I think definitely we need to look at services and resources there.
So to conclude, Ingrid, would I be correct in saying that certainty for service providers, certainties for families, certainty for organisations and other community partners is the key thing that we need, having come out of this terrible period of uncertainty, to ensure that you can do your job to the best of your ability and that your organisation can fulfil the role that it needs to play in the community on a day-to-day basis, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainty, I suppose, is important, but also remembering that, you know, it's a whole community approach. So, you know, to kind of create an educational advantage, we need to be looking not only at the schools, but the families, the wider community, and, you know, the wider region, really, I suppose.
Thank you very much, Ingrid.
You're welcome.
Thank you.